previously served as New York City's Deputy Controller, where I spearheaded the Big Apple's financial transparency initiatives, including the development of the award-winning Checkbook NYC website. While in New York, I was a proud Socrata customer, and I recently had the opportunity to join the Socrata family and work as a senior advisor with governments of all sizes on issues of financial transparency. I'm delighted to be joined today by two financial transparency trailblazers, Victoria Lewis, Montgomery County's Data Montgomery Project Manager. Give her a round of applause, please. And to her left, Chris Dwelly's the City of Boston Citywide Performance Manager. Can anyone recognize this? Just relax in your seats. Highest grossing film from 1985. I heard an E.T. Close. Who said that? All right, give that man a prize. When Kevin asked me to join Socrata, he said he wanted me to help build out a suite of financial transparency apps, informed by the work I did in New York City with putting the Big Apple's $70 billion budget online. I told him that that sounds great as long as I would have an opportunity to work on other innovative projects. We shook hands. No one in Socrata really knows this yet, but I've been working on a special project over the past few months that I believe will have serious ramifications for the company's future and for the future of this movement. Today, for the first time ever, I want to unveil a new product. Admittedly, it's still in a pre-beta conceptual stage. My friends, please give a warm welcome to the Socrata Time Machine. Before we get to that, by your laughter, I see that I hear the voices of the naysayers, but that's okay. The people in this room are used to that, and I say with what I'm about to say with a lot of love. Socrata is an innovative company, but are they willing to truly push the envelope when it comes to new products? Really push the envelope. I mean, when we talk about the Socrata Time Machine, I can hear folks from marketing questioning the demand. Do governments really need time machines? Finance will throw around terms like ROI on time machines. And folks in engineering will undoubtedly kvetch about technical hurdles, laws of physics, and things of that sort. But I, for one, think that ambitious projects are possible when you put your mind to it. And I mean, think about it in all seriousness. When we talk about open data, it's a somewhat limited vision. It's limited to what exists or what can be created. How about the data from the past that has not been preserved? That's where the time machine comes in. Let's take it for a spin. Sort of like a demo.
Let's rock.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
What's this? What's this?
What did I tell you? 88 miles per hour!
Where have we arrived? Where have we arrived, my friends? My open data friends, financial transparency friends. Where are we? Philadelphia. Okay, you all get prizes. What year is it? 17? Close. Closer. 1787, it's the signing of the Constitution. And certainly, I am aware of the fact that it might strike folks as a bit odd to begin our discussion about online financial transparency by focusing on an event that happened more than 225 years ago, way before the digital era. But what we'll soon find out is while the language of financial transparency is new, the concept goes back to the founding of our country. In fact, financial transparency is something the founding fathers debated and deliberated on more than 200 years ago. As a historical side note, one of the interesting aspects of the convention is that the delegates agreed that their deliberations would all be secret. So C-SPAN was not in the room during the Constitutional Convention. How do we know what went on there besides the final document, which was an experiment in crowdsourcing before the word came to be? Well, James Madison, representing his home state of Virginia, and we're fortunate to be in Virginia today, took extensive notes of the proceedings, and they're really the source for looking to them. It's not formal minutes, but kind of reproducing the conversations from the Constitutional Convention. So let's together walk through some of Madison's notes just 3 days before the Constitution was signed. You can imagine people were getting antsy. They've been there for weeks. They want to get home to their families. They want to get home to their states. But they knew that they had a democracy to build, and they realized the responsibilities that they had. So this is going in 3 days before the Constitution, and we're listening to their conversations. The committee recommends, this is from James Madison, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law. What does that mean? The states were coming together. They were each contributing funds, and the founding fathers wanted to make sure that there was a structured process of decision-making on how the money was going to be appropriated, how it was going to be spent. Their concerns were no different from the concerns of taxpayers today who want to know in 2014 how our hard-earned money is being spent. The conversation went on. And George Mason, also from Virginia, said, that's not enough. I move to add a clause that an account of public expenditures should be published, annually published. He said, you might have a budgeting process, but I want to see the books once the money is spent. I want some financial reporting. I want open expenditures. Robert Morris disagrees from Pennsylvania, and Rufus King comes in to back him up. And he says, well, that sounds good, but people can misinterpret the term expenditures. They can say that it goes to every minute shilling, every dollar, every penny. That's impractical. Congress can make monthly publications, but it would be in such general statements that nobody would be satisfied with the information. What Mr. King was saying is, hey, guys, don't forget, we're in 1787. We're not running SunGard or Oracle Financials or CGI Advantage. We don't even have Excel. We don't have PDFs. How do you want us to keep track of every penny that is spent? That's how people are going to interpret this. James Madison gets up and says, well, okay, calm down, guys. We're going to strike out the word annually. We're going to put in the word from time to time, which would enjoin the duty of frequent publications and leave enough discretion of the legislature. Remember that term for a few minutes. And James Madison kind of brought people together on this, and that's how we got Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. Those were the deliberations they had on financial transparency over 200 years ago. And if we have to summarize what they were struggling with, there were three key financial transparency challenges that they were talking about. One was the frequency of publication. Morris was advocating for annual, and Madison said from time to time, which is basically kicking the can on that. Level of detail, King got up and said, well, not so easy to report on every single penny we spent. And then Madison, I believe with using the words discretion, although I haven't checked this with any historian, I probably should, that he was reminding folks that it's really nice to talk about financial transparency, but let's not forget about the British here. It was the British of 1787, not 2014. They weren't the top allies, and there were all sorts of expenditures associated with spying that would not, he didn't want those expenditures to find their way into financial reporting. So there are really interesting conversations on transparency that occurred a while back. This is a screenshot of Checkbook NYC. I'm the father of 4, 3 humans and 1 website. Checkbook is my 4th baby. And I was fascinated to learn that some of the same issues the Founding Fathers struggled with in 1787 were issues that we struggled with in New York City in 2010. So we also struggled with publication frequency. We decided to update Checkbook NYC every 24 hours. We too struggled with level of detail. We went for check level expenditures because we believe that taxpayers want to get the granular data. And in terms of privacy, we redacted the names of individuals and certain law enforcement and social service expenditures to protect people's privacy. It cost $3 million to build, and it's deeply satisfying to me that I get to work with a company as great as Socrata now and help roll out these financial transparency apps which essentially leverage the same technology at a fraction of the cost. So we have towns with 3,500 people. Compare that to New York City's 8 million people. They now have access to the same technology. That's just amazing. Here's a sneak peek at Open Expenditures Montgomery County, which Victoria and her team's been hard at work on. I understand it's launching next month. And Open Budget, which Chris worked on in Boston. 2 extraordinary sites, and you guys are going to see these sites really throughout the country and the world in the months and years to come. So once again, it is great to have Victoria and Chris with us to share some of their experience and expertise. And I'd like to start with Victoria. And some of the most interesting aspects of the way, and Saf talked about this yesterday, the way Socrata is building these apps is that it's not only apps designed for government, it's apps designed by government. Victoria, can you tell us more about this innovative design partnership with Montgomery County and Socrata around the transparency apps?
Sure. Is this working? Okay. I think what would be important for you guys to know is the history of this, so that I have some notes where I was just going to talk about a little bit of the milestones of how this came to be, and also it doesn't make me look quite as old school that I'm reading from paper and not some iPad or something. So in late 2012, we got an email from a county council member. They sent us a link of a New York City checkbook and asked, one of the basic questions is, can we do something like this? So the first reaction I think was apprehensive, because if you look at the New York City checkbook site, they give a lot of information and encompasses information from multiple departments, and there's a lot of considerations with that data. So I took the New York City checkbook site and I met with lead departments that have financial data, so our budget department, finance department, and procurement. And we came up with our initial reaction and a list of requirements of our wish list of what we would like to show for financial spending. So we went back to Socrata and looked at their Checkbook Explorer app and said, I would like to purchase your Checkbook Explorer, but I would like to add about 50 to 75 requirements to that to fit these needs. So Socrata, in the most polite way possible, said, no, we're not going to do that. And hung my head for a second. They said, but what we could do is that if you're willing to help us guide the direction of these tools, we are willing to commit our resources to create something even bigger than what we initially had. So we formed a partnership with Socrata in summer of last year. And the roles were to be that Socrata would commit their development resources and their knowledge of the open data platform, and we would bring to the table our functional knowledge, and we committed to putting our best functional experts in budget, finance, and procurement to the table to help describe what budget operations were like, what spending in a real county environment was like, and to help form the vision of what ideally this product should look like. So together we decided to explore this scoping scenario, and we put together a transparency panel with external people in the county. So we had some advocacy organizations, some residents, some people in the IT community come to the table and ask them the question, if we're talking about financial transparency, what do you think that is? So we were very surprised by the reactions that we got, because we assumed that we would throw our operating budget up and we would throw some spending up and everybody would be reasonably happy with what we had, cover few common FOIA requests. And the preparation for the session was amazing, where people would come with questions that they wanted answered on this site. So they would ask questions like, what's the status of a library construction in my neighborhood? What's being funded for that, and what's the latest status on that construction? Or what types of things are you guys spending money? Who's spending the money, and who are you spending the money with? Like, who are you doing business with? And we realized that that was taking the form of three kind of separate sites. So a budget site, spending, and a deep dive into our contracts information. So that's kind of our general vision. And for us, the development relationship was very crucial for us, because we could use our experts and the public to kind of help guide this project through scoping, through the iterative design. We developed user personas with Socrata of the types of people that we were targeting that would use this site. So other government employees, reporters, advocacy organizations, other residents, and we tried to be able to have these sites fit the needs of the types of questions that they were going to ask based on the feedback that we got. So that was a resounding theme throughout the project for each of these apps, where we weren't just building this in the bubble as with Socrata. It wasn't just the two of us, it was the two of us plus representation from all of these different user personas that we felt extended not just to Montgomery County, but to different governments all over the country. And so we went through this iterative process, developed a data set structure that would help fuel a site like this, and that's how we set up our data set schema and hopefully a future financial standard that others can use. And then it just ended up that all these pieces fit together and we're launch ready. So this was a development partnership that was definitely, I think one party didn't outweigh the other. We all worked really hard to form something that we thought that not only we could use and our residents, but other governments as well.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, and any of you, and I'm sure many of the people here today representing governments who have dealt with other technology vendors, this is a very, very fundamentally different process, a collaborative process, a partnership process, and it's really a game changer. I believe in the way we work together. But thank you for all your amazing work in Montgomery County, and I know that continues. I'm going to turn to Chris from Boston. In 2013, US PIRG released a report that ranked the financial transparency of major cities. How did that report influence Boston's efforts in financial transparency? And in your experience, could advocates from outside of government have an impact on what government is doing internally in this space?
Thanks, Ari. Everyone always likes to bring up the report. So a few years ago, the city of Boston, like a lot of the other cities and towns here today and across the country, really started to delve into open data and publishing a lot of government information to the public to be consumed. And the city acquired Socrata's open data platform to host those efforts in the city. And relatively quickly, we published a lot of, I think, informative data sets, things like 911 information, crime information, 311 information, data that was essentially asked for and consumed, and we saw people actually using it, and everything was great. We were like, oh, this open data is easy. We published some good data sets, people are using it, everybody's happy. And shortly thereafter, US PIRG released a ranking of the, I believe it's the 50 most populous states, or cities rather, throughout the country, and their efforts around financial transparency. And it was dismal for Boston. I think it was a D minus, not even a D. We received a D minus. I do want to say the report was focused strictly on financial transparency, and we were publishing a few things. We're publishing data sets on contract information and every government employee's favorite data set, which is employee earnings, so they can see what their colleagues and friends are making. But it was an eye-opener for us, and at the time our CFO was mortified and said that she had never received a D in her entire life. So we knew we wanted to do something, and the first thought was, well, let's put our expenditure data up, let's put our budget data up, but we wanted to do a little bit more. And looking at cities like New York City and some other local communities in Massachusetts, we saw that there was this move behind these financial transparency apps that actually tell a story of where the money's coming from, where the money's going, what it's going toward, and we really liked that. So we looked around and eventually settled on Socrata's open expenditure application, which was really well received, both from internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders, and that actually started the momentum. We now just released a few months back the open budget application, and we're looking to do so much more around contracting and procurement information as well. So that's a little background on how Boston has gotten to the point of where we're at now in terms of financial transparency. But to answer your question, Ari, yes, I think that public interest groups do have, I would say, power, especially when it comes to finances, because it's taxpayer money, to kind of influence the way that governments not just release this data for public consumption, but actually how they convey it to show the citizenry what they're receiving for their tax dollars.
Thank you, thank you. You guys know that New Yorkers don't brag about anything, but I would point out that Checkbook NYC was ranked #1 in that report. It is now time for a very exciting and special part of our program, our panel discussion. I know there's been a lot of buzz about it on Twitter and in other places. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the lightning round. What is the lightning round, you might ask yourselves? Well, we have two contestants here, one from Montgomery County and one from Boston. And we have a round of questions, which they may or may not have seen before this program. And they have 60 seconds to answer each question. And I'm just going to sort of put the questions out there. Victoria, if you want to jump in. Chris, if you want to jump in. But please remain civil throughout this process. We don't want things getting out of hand here. So I am going to kick off this lightning round of 60-second questions with the following. Why do we really need financial transparency apps? I mean, Socrata has this great open data portal. Why is it so important to invest in financial transparency apps?
Thank you. I think the big thing that I always think about, and I think this was echoed earlier in Beth's and Matt's panel earlier, was how do we tell a story about what city government or government entities are delivering? Is it helpful to just throw a data set of financial information up and assume that your everyday user can understand or know what any of that information actually is in a tabular form? Or is it really the best use of anyone's time to thumb through 3 volumes, 400 pages of an annual budget document to see the services that cities are providing? And my answer to that really is no, that there's a better way. I'm running out of time, and the financial transparency apps really help us.
I'm sorry, I need to cut you off right now. I know you're an important customer, but 60 seconds is 60 seconds.
The folks last night at the speed data got extended time.
You need an accent. You need an accent. Yeah.
Okay. Here is the next lightning round question. Why did either of you choose to work with Socrata on financial transparency on these apps? Why not try to develop something in-house or work with another vendor? Why Socrata? This is where you're supposed to praise us.
Okay. We actually didn't just look at Socrata. We actually were considering 3 different options at Montgomery County. And we looked at that because there wasn't an ideal product out there. We had some considerations where one of the tools was open source, but it was in a language that we weren't familiar with and still would take a lot of maintenance. There's another in-house option that we had that would put a weight on a resource pool that was already weighed down. So this one and the possibilities with this development partnership were really ideal situation for us, where we could get exactly what we wanted within the open data platform. So as long as we publish our data sets and kept it up to date, that we could power something like this is pretty great.
Yeah, and just to add to that, with all seriousness, I know that Montgomery County went through a very serious due diligence process with figuring out how to put their financial data online, and made those decisions in a very careful manner. Is there anything you want to add to that, Chris?
No, one of the things that we really liked about Socrata's offerings was the flexibility to be able to kind of fit our business processes and how we structure a lot of our finances into an application. And one of the other things, people always ask, well, why not open source? And it just, at the time, with staffing capacity, it was just, it was, I wouldn't say easiest, but it made sense for us to go with a kind of an already packaged solution.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our next question is in the area of privacy. It's always a challenge when placing huge amounts of any type of data into the public domain, but particularly financial data. How did you guys in Boston, how did you guys in Montgomery County deal with the issue of privacy?
It's stressful.
It is.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be stressful. We're going to stop the clock now.
I'm sweating. This is bad.
Let me tell you, there's a beautiful lunch outside. These people are friendly. How did you guys deal with privacy issues?
I don't know. I was starting to get used to the whole West Side Story thing. I don't know. For us, I can talk about it from a spending perspective, that when we met with our finance department and they completely embraced a concept like this. We had a data set and Data Montgomery for spending information that really was not enough information for the public to actually understand our spending. So they wanted to show more information, but the reason why they didn't publish much before was they had this whole consideration for confidential and sensitive data, and that's a huge topic for people to tackle. And so our finance department met with departments to start to identify large chunks and swaths of data of different considerations like HIPAA data, privacy information, things that might be a public safety risk. And they went through an iterative departmental review where the results of that they took the form of a certification with each department that confirmed what type of data needed to be either encrypted or omitted from our spending data due to X law or X reason. And an ongoing process now where we have an open communication channel with departments for what the new law comes about or something that they realize they miss, we can address that. And then an annual certification where we're almost forcing them to look at this data again to make sure we're protecting the data for those who need to be protected.
Victoria, let me just jump in here. What percentage of the time, can you give folks a sense of how much time you and your colleagues spent with the attorneys, going department to department and dealing with these issues?
That was a long and rough road.
Not easy. And there's no roadmap.
Well, and it's something also that you have to involve attorneys for a process like this. And at least in our world, there aren't many topics where every attorney for every department needs to get involved. So we had to find a process to make that work, and with the financial, and for them to understand the financial data and how it affects the laws that they're working to protect the county from. And I think for us, we wanted to make sure it's something that we could consistently do. So part of the process for us was figuring out how to either omit or encrypt this data in a systematic way, built into our system, built into our data extract, so that we could make sure that we are putting in every action possible to make sure that we're not releasing something that shouldn't be released.
How about you guys in Boston? How did you deal with the privacy issues, or was it a serious issue for you?
I mean, it was a serious issue in respects that it was an important issue for us, that we didn't want to release any private information. It was a very similar process to Montgomery County, where it was very iterative. We met with department folks. We met with a lot of legal individuals to make sure that we weren't putting information out there, but we also wanted to make sure that we were putting information out there that we could put out that wasn't restricted by law, that maybe some folks may have been hesitant or uncomfortable to put out. But I think it took some time, but it was well worth it. And if I have a quick second, while as we began this process, a colleague of mine was at a conference and was talking about the expenditure app, and he was from the state, and he had mentioned when they were releasing their information, they inadvertently released data on witness protection program individuals, as well as confidential informants. So ensuring that you're not releasing private information like that is of the utmost importance.
You know what we should probably do, and I'll give it some thought, and I'll speak to folks from Socrata. It would be interesting, I think, to document the privacy practices in different jurisdictions, and perhaps that would make it a bit easier on folks who have not adopted online financial transparency products yet to make those decisions. Because I know in New York, when we started talking to NYPD attorneys and our Department of Health, they were facing that for the first time, and there was no template for them to look at. And certainly, I think the decisions that are made in Boston, Montgomery County, and other places could be instructive. Without naming names, or with naming names if you'd like, were there individuals or departments who, not necessarily on the privacy side, but were people trying to stop this financial transparency train from proceeding? Were there any internal hurdles? Did anyone say, over my dead body will Boston's budget be online? Will Montgomery's budget be online? You guys don't know what you're doing. This is a crazy idea.
Yeah.
That guy. I'm just kidding. I think for us, I think one of the great things about working in Montgomery County is I really didn't. We had some departmental apprehension about making sure that the Department of Finance was going through the appropriate process to make sure that we weren't showing what we shouldn't be showing. But I did not really, not only did I not feel apprehension or people trying to make sure it didn't happen, we got a lot of support from our management, from both the IT and the department and our county executive's office, and the individual data owners. They really wanted to do this.
And remind me, Victoria, was this in response to legislation that you guys passed in Montgomery County, or was it just an internal initiative? You thought this was the right thing to do, let's do it?
I think it was not. Our Open Data Act asked for us to inventory all of our available data sets, and spending and budget was one of our available data sets, but it didn't specify what we needed to show in there. So technically, our initial spending and budget data sets would have complied with that act. The thing is, though, is that nobody was looking at them. So OMB and Finance spent all of this time generating this report, and I think there were a lot more data sets that they thought were a lot less important that were getting that those views. So I think it was an internal movement that eventually was started from the initial county council message that really got the thought process going, and the departments really embraced it and went with it.
Chris, what about in Boston? How did things go there? Was there opposition internal opposition to this?
No opposition at all, which was really fantastic. Everybody kind of saw the benefit and was like, this makes a lot of sense. Like what we were talking about in the last question about privacy, that was the major concern. Make sure that we do it right. But there was no opposition to the idea of pushing this out.
Now that I'm no longer employed by the city of New York, I can say that there was opposition. When we went down the road of checkbook. Folks were scared. We were one of the earlier cities and states to adopt it, and it was a huge cultural shift. But once decision makers understood that this was going to happen, then we got into kind of a collaborative phase to make sure that we redact the data that shouldn't be there. In your experience, who's using these apps and there's been a lot of talk about internal use of Socrata's products, internal to government. Is that your experience, or do you think it's more taxpayers, advocates? What are you guys finding?
You want to talk to budget, talk to spending?
Yeah, sure. So we see internal and external audiences using both of our applications, which is really promising. We see, what am I talking about, budget? So I can't talk about FOIA requests.
Talk about whatever you want.
So, we have external folks, FOIA requests, people from the media using the graphics and the data to incorporate into newspaper articles, magazine articles, websites, presentations. We see academic folks using it. And it was always interesting. You assume that departments own this data and can just do all their calculations and go into their source system and figure everything out. But it was funny to me to see, or interesting to see, that these apps are actually really helping to expedite certain business needs for folks in the various budget departments, auditing departments as well. So it's a nice mix that we got.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say, just to Karen, for budget, that internally we have county employees that can refer to Budget Montgomery, or we actually have an online publication of our budget book too that kind of attaches to this to get budget data rather than thumbing through a book to get the answers they need. And I know for spending, we will get some traffic from some department folks that are interested in spending for like items in their departments. But the excitement that we've been getting is from these advocacy organizations and, of course, journalists, but especially as advocacy organizations, because if you think of their thought process on how they try to work with governments to identify cost-saving opportunities, or maybe a misuse of funds or duplicate funds. I mean, we can really use that as an extra channel to help us.
Which brings me to the next question. We have two more questions, which is, does this really save taxpayer money? Do you truly believe that financial transparency saves taxpayer money?
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I think so, and I'll use one example of a colleague of mine. A lot of the FOIA requests that the city receives, and they are a lot, typically go through this one individual, and it used to take her time to have to go and ask for this information and work with people, and then they'd pull an extract. Maybe they'd have to talk to the IT team. And now we're able to just refer those individuals right to the various apps. So if you're looking at the certain expenditures that we're paying toward vendors, which is a favorite of a lot of people's, we can just point you right there, and it's easy for you to access. So in terms of time saving, I think absolutely it saves taxpayer money, because that individual can now be working on other things that will hopefully be, affecting positive change in the government than just tracking down data sets.
Similar in Montgomery County?
So when we created these, or helped design these apps, we kept a lot of our common FOIA or MPIA requests in mind. So we're hoping that that will be considered a lot for people to look at these apps instead of asking. But we also publish our MPIA responses in a data set on Data Montgomery. So we're hoping that we can learn from that to see what kind of requests that we've been responding to keep evolving and making sure that we're kind of using this as best as we can to kind of mitigate some of that. And again, residents finding a way to identify cost opportunities, I think that would be a way for the county to save some money.
Yeah, and I know in New York I used to get asked the question a lot, primarily from the controller himself, who was a very quantitatively oriented guy. How much money is this saving? And certainly there's FOIA requests and there's other cost savings from vendors going in, checking what their competitors are, what kind of deals their competitors are offering governments, and that drives down costs through competition. But I think the biggest cost savings with financial transparency can't be quantified easily, because the cost, what you're really doing is you're saving money by making fewer bad decisions. And it's just human psychology that when your financial decisions are put into the public domain and people know that as they're making the decisions will be better. And if you can just save 1% of your budget by making better decisions, or 0.1% of your budget, the ROI is off the charts on the financial transparency apps.
And Ari, if I could just say one more thing. I mean, I just don't think that money is the way to look at this. With us, there's only certain people that could understand a budget book. There's only certain people that could understand our GL structure and how we spend money. That's a narrow group of people that can give you feedback and engage with. This is supposed to broaden that base and really increase the amount of people that you can really have a real conversation with.
So I know we're running a few minutes late, so I'm going to skip the Q&A before we get to the closing remarks. We can do Q&A informally as people exit. They can come to the stage, and I'm sure Victoria and Chris and myself would be delighted to talk with you in more detail about this. But I just want to offer my closing thoughts in this area. There's a lot of scary things going on in the world today. And we had fun, we showed Back to the Future, and we had the lightning round, and it's fun having fun, but there's a lot of serious stuff going on today. But I believe, and I would argue, that the most serious issue is not Ebola, it's not ISIS, it's not hunger, it's not climate change, it's not cancer. And those are all serious issues. The most serious issue, albeit it's less talked about, is this graph up on the screen. And the most serious crisis facing the United States of America today is the 50-point decline in the public's trust of government from 1960, from the 75% zone to the 25% zone today. To me, that is the most serious crisis. Complex problems require collective action, and collective action requires a healthy and strong government. And if we want to rebuild our democracy, we need to rebuild this trust between the government and the public. Look, open data and financial transparency alone will not solve all of these problems, but they're a huge step in the right direction to reestablish trust between government and the public. That's one of the reasons I'm so proud to be associated with Socrata, and why the work that Victoria does, that Chris does, and that everyone here today does is so important. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you again, Chris and Victoria, for sharing your stories with us.
Thanks, Victoria. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ari, for taking us on a trip back in time.